I was crouching in front of the doghouse in the corner of the yard, my hands trembling as I stuffed a faded cotton quilt inside. The autumn wind already carried a hint of a chill, making my arthritis flare up. It felt like 1,000 tiny needles were piercing my kneecaps. The doghouse was meant for Buddy, our golden retriever, but Buddy always slept on the plush rug in the living room. This small wooden structure, instead, would be my shelter for the night. "Mom, can you hurry it up? Look at the time." "I have to get up early for work tomorrow," Michael called out impatiently from the doorway of the back deck. He was wearing that set of $200 silk pajamas, a gift his wife, Jessica, had carefully chosen for him on my birthday last year. "Almost done," I answered in a low voice, afraid that speaking any louder would annoy him. "The old hag has learned how to be a sneaky thief," Michael's words from a few hours ago, spoken as he yanked my hair, still echoed in my ears, my scalp still throbbing with a dull ache. "Tonight, you can go sleep in the doghouse and think about what you've done." I slowly curled myself into the doghouse. The space was plenty roomy for Buddy, but for a 74-year-old woman like me, it was painfully cramped. I had to arch my back like a shrimp, my legs bent, just to be able to lie down. The rough wood scraped against my arms, leaving behind red marks. The doghouse had no door, and the night wind poured directly in. I pulled the thin quilt tighter around myself, listening to the faint sound of the television coming from the house. It was the financial news channel Michael loved to watch. A warm yellow light filtered through the triple-layered curtains I had picked out and installed myself, hoping to add a touch of warmth to their new home. How ironic it seemed now. It all started this afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Jessica stormed in, her face livid. "Mom, have you seen my gold necklace?" I put down the kitchen knife and wiped my hands on my apron. "What gold necklace?" "The one Michael gave me for our wedding. It's worth over $3,000. I always keep it in the jewelry box on my dresser, but I went to wear it today, and it's gone." Jessica's voice was sharp and piercing. I shook my head. "I haven't seen it. Are you sure you didn't put it somewhere else?" "How could I? I know I left it right there." Jessica's gaze sharpened. "Mom, there are only 3 of us in this house, and Buddy isn't going to take it." My heart sank. I understood the implication in her voice. When Michael got home from work, Jessica immediately threw herself into his arms, sobbing. I stood at the kitchen doorway, watching my son comfort his wife before he turned to me, his eyes instantly turning to ice. "Mom, did you really take Jessica's necklace?" Michael's voice was low and dangerous. "I did not," I answered calmly. "Then how did it just disappear?" He advanced on me. "Mom, we're not short on money in this house. If you wanted something, you just had to tell me. Why would you have to steal?" "I didn't steal," I repeated, my fingers unconsciously twisting the hem of my apron. "Still denying it?" Michael suddenly erupted in anger, grabbing my wrist. "Look at this gold bracelet on your wrist. Isn't that the one Dad left you? You have your own jewelry, so why would you take Jessica's?" "That was the last gift my husband gave me before he passed away. I hadn't taken it off in 30 years. I explained, trembling. "This was from your father. How could I?" "Enough," Michael cut me off. "Mom, you've disappointed me so much. Now, get on your knees and apologize to Jessica. Otherwise, don't blame me for what happens next." My eyes widened in disbelief. The son I had raised all by myself was demanding I kneel before his wife. Jessica stood behind Michael, a faint smirk on her lips, her eyes glittering with triumph. I suddenly understood this was a premeditated attack. Last week, I had accidentally seen her at a coffee shop, speaking intimately with a strange man. Since then, her attitude towards me had grown even worse. "Michael, I'm your mother," my voice choked with emotion. "Kneel," Michael roared, grabbing a handful of my hair and forcing me down. The pain and humiliation made my legs go weak, and my knees hit the hard marble floor with a thud. Tears blurred my vision, but I could clearly see the triumphant smile on Jessica's face. "I'm sorry," I repeated mechanically, my heart feeling as though it were being shredded. "Tonight, you'll sleep in the doghouse and think about what you've done," Michael said, then wrapped his arm around Jessica and went upstairs, leaving me kneeling on the cold floor. The night grew deeper, and the lights in the house finally went out. Lying in the doghouse, I listened to the chirping of insects in the grass, my thoughts drifting back more than 30 years. Michael was 5 when his father died in a construction accident. The compensation money was stolen by a crooked boss. I worked at the textile mill during the day and took in sewing work at night, often staying up until dawn. To make sure Michael could eat meat, I didn't buy a single new piece of clothing for 3 years straight. I remember one winter was especially cold. I had a high fever but still went to work, just so I wouldn't lose the $20 perfect attendance bonus, which I used to buy Michael a pair of warm, cotton-padded boots. Later, when Michael got into college, I sold my only gold ring to help pay his tuition. After graduation, his first business failed, and he was deep in debt. I used all my savings to pay it off for him. 3 years ago, when he got married and bought this house, I sold my old family home without a second thought to help with the down payment. A single tear traced a path through the wrinkles on my cheek and fell onto the straw in the doghouse. I reached up to wipe it away, but felt the phone tucked into the inner pocket of my coat. Thankfully, they hadn't searched me. The faint glow of the screen illuminated my old face. I opened my photo album and scrolled to the picture I had secretly taken last week. The image of Jessica kissing that man in the corner of the coffee shop was perfectly clear. I had only taken it out of suspicion at the time. I never thought it would become my lifeline, but I didn't act immediately. 74 years of life had taught me that decisions made in anger often lead to regret. I turned off the phone and curled up tighter against the cold wind. Tomorrow, I would pretend to be obedient. I would continue to play the part of a senile old woman, silently enduring their humiliation. But where they couldn't see, I would be like my younger self at the textile mill, weaving my counterattack, thread by thread. The big Thanksgiving dinner was only 3 days away. Jessica had invited all the relatives. Knowing Michael's personality, he would undoubtedly show off how filial he was, and I would give him a surprise he would never forget. The moon outside the doghouse was large and round. Thanksgiving was almost here. I gently caressed the gold bracelet on my wrist, feeling as if my husband were still here, watching over me. "Honey, just wait a little longer," I whispered to the night sky. "After I teach this ungrateful son a lesson, I'll come find you and make my peace." The morning sun stung my eyes. I had been curled up in the doghouse all night, and every bone in my body felt like it was falling apart. I heard footsteps in the yard and forced my eyelids open to see Jessica walking towards me in her high heels. "Mom, what are you still doing here?" She widened her eyes in feigned surprise, but her voice was devoid of any warmth. "Get up, quickly. It wouldn't look good if the neighbors saw you." I slowly crawled out of the doghouse, my knees making a creaking sound as if they were about to give out. Jessica stood about 6 feet away, as if afraid of catching my bad luck. She was wearing a tight-fitting dress today, and around her neck, clear as day, was the missing gold necklace. "Your necklace," I couldn't help but say. Jessica's fingers instinctively went to the necklace, a cold smirk playing on her lips. "I found it under my dresser this morning. It must have fallen into a crack." She paused, then added pointedly, "It's a good thing I found it, or else it would have been hard to explain." I silently brushed the grass clippings off my clothes, not bothering to expose her lie. The night before, just before going to sleep, I had clearly seen through a gap in the curtains as she furtively retrieved the necklace from a hidden compartment in her dresser. "Oh, by the way," Jessica added before turning to leave, "someone from social services is coming today to register seniors for benefits. You'd better watch what you say." I nodded, but an idea was already forming in my mind. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell rang right on time. The person at the door was a young woman in her early 20s, her name tag reading, "Sarah, Community Outreach Center." "Hello, I'm here to register seniors over 65 for community benefits," she said with a warm smile, her eyes curving into crescents. Jessica came out from the kitchen, her hands still dusted with flour. "Oh, thank you for coming all this way. My mother-in-law isn't feeling well. She's resting." She turned to me, her tone sickeningly sweet. "Mom, if you're not feeling up to it, just stay put. I can help you fill out the form." Sarah looked at me, then at Jessica, a little confused. According to the regulations, the person must confirm the information in person. "I'm fine," I interrupted Jessica, slowly walking to the door. "Miss, why don't we talk in the yard? The sun is nice today. Jessica's expression turned cold instantly, but she couldn't object in front of a visitor. She forced a smile and handed me a jacket. Mom, don't catch a cold. In the yard, Sarah helped me sit down in a wicker chair. As her fingers touched my wrist, she flinched slightly. There was a bruise where Michael had grabbed me last night. Ma'am, you, she started, then hesitated, her eyes scanning my messy hair and wrinkled clothes. I calmly took the form from her. I'm getting old, not as steady on my feet. I took a little fall this morning. Sarah pursed her lips, clearly not buying it. As I filled out the form, her gaze drifted several times to the doghouse in the corner of the yard, where my quilt was still laid out. Ma'am, she suddenly lowered her voice, the community has a shelter for the elderly, if you need. Thank you, dear, I interrupted her, deliberately raising my voice so Jessica could hear from the kitchen window. My son and daughter-in-law are very good to me. We don't lack for anything here. Sarah nodded helplessly. As she was leaving, she quietly slipped me a business card. If you need anything, call me any time. The moment she left, Jessica rushed out to see what we had talked about. I handed her the form. Jessica, does this look right? Jessica glanced at it and snorted. You know what's good for you. In the afternoon, Michael came home early for once, and he brought a guest, his college friend Mark. They were discussing business in the study. When I brought in a tray of tea, I overheard words like loan and collateral. Mom, Michael frowned, we're in the middle of something. But Mark stood up and took the tray from me. Aunt Helen, please don't trouble yourself. Sit down and rest for a bit. He looked at my rough hands and the faded fabric of my clothes, his expression complicated. Outside the study, I paused to listen. Mark lowered his voice. Mike, your mom is getting on in years. How can you? What's it to you? Michael cut him off impatiently. This is my family's business. It's none of your concern. I just think. Think what? If it weren't for you helping me get this loan, I'd have kicked you out already. I quietly retreated to the kitchen, a plan forming in my mind. It seemed Michael's company was in trouble. No wonder his temper had been so short lately. At dinner, Jessica was unusually attentive, placing food on my plate. Mom, eat up. She turned to Michael. Honey, I've been thinking, it's not right to make Mom keep sleeping outside. What if she gets sick? We'd be the ones taking care of her. Michael shoveled rice into his mouth without looking up. Whatever you want. Mom, Jessica said in a syrupy voice, you can move back into the guest room tonight. I pretended to be grateful and nodded, but alarm bells were ringing in my head. There had to be a reason for Jessica's sudden kindness. Sure enough, before bed, I used the excuse of going to the bathroom and passed by their master bedroom. I heard them arguing. Are you crazy? Letting her move back in? Michael's voice was a low, angry hiss. Jessica scoffed. What do you know? Thanksgiving is coming up. All your rich uncles and aunts are coming over. If they see your mother sleeping in a doghouse, your reputation will be ruined. Besides, Jessica continued, I did some checking. The buyout for your mom's old house is coming through soon. It's worth at least $200,000. If we're nice to her now, she'll be willing to sign it over. I covered my mouth and tiptoed back to the guest room. So that was it. They didn't just want to strip me of my dignity, they wanted to take my last remaining asset. On the nightstand, Sarah's business card gleamed in the moonlight. I caressed the card, a plan solidifying in my mind. The week before Thanksgiving, Jessica began preparing for the family feast in grand style. One delivery after another brought high-end gift boxes and decorations. The living room was soon piled high with beautifully packaged pies and fruit baskets. Mom, Jessica said, walking into the kitchen with a new outfit. I bought this for you to wear on Thanksgiving. Try it on and see if it fits. I put down the dishes I was washing, dried my hands, and took the clothes. It was a dark red traditional-style suit made of fine material. The 4-digit price on the tag was glaring. Thank you. You shouldn't have, I said, pretending to be overwhelmed. But inwardly I was sneering. This act was almost too obvious. Jessica smiled, satisfied. All the relatives are coming for Thanksgiving. You have to look presentable. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. By the way, we're going to announce some good news that day. I need you to play along, understand? I nodded, and obediently took the clothes back to my room to try on. After closing the door, I carefully checked the pockets. Sure enough, tucked into the lining, I found a tiny recording device. Just as I suspected, I smirked and put the recorder back exactly where I found it. They wanted to record me voluntarily agreeing to go to a nursing home to prove to the relatives how considerate they were. After dinner, Michael uncharacteristically came to talk to me. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me with a stiff expression, "we're taking a family photo on Thanksgiving. Remember to wear the new clothes Jessica bought you." "Okay," I mumbled, looking down, my fingers unconsciously tracing the rim of my teacup. Michael hesitated, then added, "I'm inviting Uncle and Aunt and everyone else that day. You know, Uncle is the most respected person in the family." I looked up, waiting quietly for him to continue. Michael avoided my gaze. "Anyway, just don't say anything out of line. If Uncle finds out that we haven't been good to you, I'll lose face." So that was it. Michael's uncle was the respected elder of the family and also an early investor in Michael's business. If his uncle found out that Michael was abusing his mother, not only would he be shamed, but it could also affect his business relationships. "I understand," I said softly. "Don't worry, I won't say the wrong thing." Michael let out a sigh of relief. As he got up to leave, he turned back and added, "By the way, Jessica's pregnant. We're announcing it on Thanksgiving." I shot my head up, too shocked to speak. Jessica was pregnant? Was this real, or just another lie? Late that night, I was tossing and turning in bed when I heard arguing from the master bedroom. I tiptoed to their door and held my breath to listen. "Are you insane? Why did you tell her I'm pregnant?" Jessica's voice was shrill. "It's the perfect excuse, isn't it?" Michael retorted. "We can use it to say she's too old to take care of a pregnant woman and smoothly send her to a nursing home. But what if she finds out it's fake? What's there to be afraid of? Once she's gone, we'll just say you had a miscarriage a few months later." My fingernails dug deep into my palms. They would even stoop to such a lie. To get rid of me, they would fabricate a pregnancy. The next morning, under the pretext of going to the farmer's market, I quietly went to my old neighbor Carol's house. Carol had been my friend for decades and had lived alone since her husband passed. "Helen," Carol's eyes reddened the moment she saw me. "You've lost so much weight." I squeezed her hand tightly. "Carol, I need you to do something for me." In Carol's modest living room, I took out a file folder. "This is the most important thing I have. It includes the deed to my old house and the will my husband left. Please keep it for me, and don't let Michael know." Carol took the folder, her face etched with worry. "Helen, tell me the truth. How is Michael treating you?" I gave a bitter smile and rolled up my sleeve, revealing the bruises on my arm. "After Thanksgiving, I'm going to let everyone know the truth." Carol gasped, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. "That animal. After you worked so hard to raise him." "Shh," I patted her hand. "Now's not the time for crying. Do me a favor. On Thanksgiving, I want you to come to the dinner as an old friend." Carol wiped her tears and nodded firmly. "Don't you worry. I'll be there." After leaving Carol's, I went to a law firm. David Miller was a good friend of my late husband. After hearing my story, his expression grew grave. "Helen, according to the elder abuse laws, what Michael is doing is illegal. You can sue him directly." I shook my head. "Not yet. After Thanksgiving, I will make them pay." Mr. Miller sighed and handed me a recording pen. "This is more discreet than a phone. A full charge can record for 48 hours straight." On my way home, I bought some dates and walnuts, so-called health foods for pregnant women. If they wanted to put on a show, I would play along. For the next few days, I was exceptionally obedient. When Jessica asked me to try on the new clothes, I did. When Michael asked me to organize old photo albums, I did. They thought I was completely in the dark, little knowing I was quietly gathering my evidence. The night before Thanksgiving, Jessica was on the phone in the living room, her voice loud. "Uncle, you have to come tomorrow." "Yes. We have a big surprise." "Yes. Yes." Mom is very happy too. Hiding in the kitchen, I used the recorder Mr. Miller had given me to capture every word. Meanwhile, my phone's photo album was already full of evidence. Pictures of the hidden compartment in Jessica's dresser, recordings of Michael threatening me, and their conversation about sending me to a nursing home. Tomorrow, when all the relatives were gathered, when they stood before everyone to boast of their filial piety, I would personally rip the masks off this hypocritical couple. I caressed my husband's photo and whispered, "Honey, just one more day. Tomorrow, I will get justice for us." On Thanksgiving Day, I woke before dawn. The moonlight was still bright outside, but the eastern sky was already showing a hint of gray. I quietly got out of bed, changed into the dark red suit, and then pulled a small cloth pouch from under the bed. Inside were the weapons I had carefully prepared over the past few days: the recording pen, my phone, printed photographs, and the gold bracelet my husband had left me. It wasn't just a keepsake. It was a testament to our marriage. At 5:30, the kitchen light came on. For the first time ever, Jessica was up early to prepare for the feast. I heard her rummaging through cabinets. "Mom," she said, pushing open my door. Seeing me already dressed, she was clearly taken aback. "You're up early. Old people don't sleep much," I said with a gentle smile. "I'll go help you with breakfast." Jessica looked me up and down, as if trying to find a flaw, but in the end, she just nodded. "Well, thank you then." In the kitchen, I skillfully kneaded dough to make biscuits while Jessica sliced fruit beside me, occasionally stealing glances at me. "Mom," she said suddenly, "Uncle and the others are bringing their kids today. Don't bring up those old stories." I knew what she was referring to: Michael's impoverished childhood, how he only finished college with his uncle's help. Now that he was successful, the last thing he wanted was for people to remember his humble past. "I know what to say and what not to say," I replied without looking up. Jessica seemed to relax, her tone becoming lighter. "Right. Later, just stay in the living room and chat with the guests. The nanny and I will handle things in the kitchen." I nodded, knowing she was afraid I would embarrass them in front of the relatives. At 9 in the morning, the relatives started to arrive. The first to come was Michael's aunt. The moment she walked in, she grabbed my hand. "Helen, you look wonderful. Michael and Jessica are taking such good care of you." I smiled and agreed, catching a glimpse of Jessica's smug expression out of the corner of my eye. Next to arrive was Michael's uncle, the most respected elder in the family. He walked with a cane, followed by his son and his family. "Helen," Uncle said, patting my shoulder, "Michael has done well for himself. It's time for you to enjoy your life." "Yes, it's all thanks to Michael and Jessica being so good to me," I said, going along with it, and saw Michael stand up a little straighter beside me. The living room quickly filled with chatter as relatives sat around drinking tea and talking. Jessica moved about like the perfect hostess, constantly offering me tea and snacks, earning a chorus of praise. "Jessica is so thoughtful, so good to her mother-in-law. Michael is so lucky to have married such a devoted wife." I smiled and accepted all the compliments, as if we truly were a harmonious and happy family. Around 11 o'clock, Carol arrived as planned. She came as an old friend bringing a Thanksgiving gift and was warmly welcomed by Jessica. "Carol?" I pretended to be surprised and stood up to greet her. As we hugged, she whispered very softly in my ear, "I brought everything." I gave an imperceptible nod and then introduced her to the relatives. "This is Carol, my neighbor for decades." Before lunch, Jessica suddenly pulled me into the kitchen. "Mom, help me with the soup." Once we were in the kitchen, her smile vanished. She warned me in a low voice, "Don't say anything foolish during the meal, you hear me?" "I know," I replied calmly, reaching for the scalding hot soup tureen. Just then, I accidentally knocked it over. The boiling soup splashed onto my arm, instantly turning a large patch of skin red. "Ah," I cried out in pain on purpose. Jessica's face paled, terrified that the relatives outside would hear. She frantically ran cold water over my arm while hissing threats at me. "You useless old hag, did you do that on purpose?" I bit my lip and said nothing, letting her roughly treat the burn. This scar would be one of my most important weapons today. Lunch began. The huge round table was laden with a feast. I was seated in the place of honor next to Uncle, with Jessica and Michael on either side of me, looking for all the world like a perfect, dutiful couple. After a few rounds of drinks, Michael stood up and raised his glass. "Today, while everyone is here, I have some good news to announce." He put his arm around Jessica's shoulder. "Jessica is pregnant. I'm going to be a father." The table erupted in cheers and congratulations. I played my part, showing a look of joyful surprise, even dabbing at the corner of my eye for a non-existent tear. Once the noise died down, Michael spoke again. "There's one more decision I'd like to get everyone's opinion on." He looked at me, his face a mask of false concern. "Mom is getting older, and with Jessica pregnant, we're worried we won't be able to give her the care she needs. So, we'd like to book a room for her at the best retirement community so she can enjoy her golden years in comfort." The dining room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. "Mom," Michael leaned in, his voice sickeningly sweet, "would you be willing?" I knew the recording pen hidden in my pocket was running. I knew everyone was waiting for my answer. I slowly stood up, the burn on my arm now clearly visible to everyone. Then, I did something they never expected. "First, thank you all for your concern." My voice was not loud, but it was exceptionally clear. "About the retirement community, I have a few things to say." Michael and Jessica's faces changed. They wanted to interrupt me, but they didn't dare in front of so many elders. I took a deep breath and pulled my phone from my pocket. "Before I answer, I'd like everyone to see a few pictures." The room was dead silent. Every eye was on the phone in my hand. I opened the first photo. It was a close-up of the hidden compartment in Jessica's dresser, the missing gold necklace clearly visible inside. "What's this?" Michael's uncle asked, squinting. "This is Jessica's gold necklace," I explained calmly. "The one she claimed I stole, for which Michael made me kneel and apologize, and then punished me by making me sleep in the doghouse." Jessica shot to her feet, her face as white as a sheet. "You're lying. I found that later." I ignored her and swiped to the next picture, the doghouse, with my quilt inside. It was taken late at night, the moonlight shining clearly on it. "This was taken by Sarah from social services that morning. She can testify to it," I said. Michael slammed his hand on the table. "Mom, have you lost your mind? Spouting nonsense in front of all our relatives." "Shut up." Uncle's voice was sharp. "Let your mother finish." I gave my uncle a grateful look and then played a recording. Michael's vicious voice filled the room. "The old hag has learned how to be a sneaky thief. Tonight, you can go sleep in the doghouse." The dining room erupted in an uproar. Michael's face was ashen. Jessica collapsed into her chair, trembling. "And this?" I rolled up my sleeve, revealing the red, swollen burn mark. "This happened half an hour ago, when Jessica accidentally caused it. In fact, for the past few months." My words were cut off by a commotion. Carol suddenly stood up and took a file folder from her bag. "I've been Helen's neighbor for 50 years. I can prove everything she's saying." She took out several photos. "This was taken at Michael's birthday party last year. The bruises on Helen's arm are clearly visible." Michael stared at Carol like a cornered animal but couldn't say a word. I took a deep breath, ready to play my final card. "Michael, Jessica, you claim you want to send me to a retirement home for my own good. But last night, I personally heard you discussing." I pressed play on the recording pen. Their conversation about faking the pregnancy echoed through the room. The guests were in shock. Uncle was shaking with rage, pointing at Michael. "You animal! Your mother raised you through hardship and sacrifice, and this is how you repay her?" Other relatives joined in, their voices a chorus of condemnation. The scene was pure chaos. Just then, Jessica let out a piercing scream and clutched her stomach, collapsing to the floor. "Ah, my stomach!" Everyone froze. A dark stain of blood was slowly spreading across the bottom of her dress. "Jessica?" Michael scrambled to her side, holding her in his arms. "Somebody call an ambulance," he screamed in terror. In the midst of the chaos, I stood my ground calmly, watching Jessica's pale face. Was this a desperate ploy? Or had the lie somehow become a terrible truth? The ambulance arrived quickly. After a brief examination, a paramedic shook his head. "Appears to be a miscarriage. We need to get her to the hospital immediately." Michael scrambled onto the ambulance with her, but not before shooting me a venomous glare, as if this were all my fault. The relatives looked at each other, unsure what to do. Uncle let out a long sigh and took my hand. "Helen, we've seen the truth today. Don't you worry. The family will not abandon you." I nodded wearily. a wave of dizziness washing over me. Carol quickly steadied me. "Helen, are you okay?" "I'm fine." I managed a weak smile. Just suddenly very tired. My carefully planned counterattack had been a complete success, yet I felt none of the anticipated triumph. Watching the ambulance speed away, a complex emotion welled up inside me. Michael was, after all, the child I had raised. No matter how ungrateful he had been, the bond of blood or so, I thought, could not be easily broken. "Let's get you home to rest," Uncle patted my shoulder. "Tomorrow, we'll have a family meeting to discuss how to handle this." Supported by my relatives, I slowly walked back into the house. The sun was setting, casting my shadow long across the ground, just like my 74 years of life, long and winding. Back in my room, I locked the door and finally allowed myself to break. Tears streamed silently down my face, not for Michael and Jessica, but for the little boy who once cuddled in my lap, the child I had given everything to love. I took out my husband's photograph and gently wiped the glass. "Honey," I whispered, "I did it. But why does my heart hurt so much?" Outside, the Thanksgiving moon was full and bright, its cold light spilling onto the floor. I remembered telling Michael the story of the man in the moon when he was a little boy. He had looked up at me with his big eyes and asked, "Mommy, isn't he lonely all by himself up there?" Now, I finally understood that loneliness. Even in victory, I had lost the most precious thing of all, family. I dried my tears and took out my phone, dialing Sarah's number. "Sarah, about that shelter for the elderly. I'd like to get some more information." 3 days after the disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, Michael finally returned from the hospital with Jessica. I was sitting in my rocking chair in the living room when I heard the key turn in the lock, followed by heavy footsteps. Michael pushed the door open. Jessica, pale and gaunt, followed behind him. They both froze when they saw me. "Mom." Michael's voice was hoarse, dark circles hanging under his eyes. "Jessica had a miscarriage." I put down the yarn I was knitting and looked at them calmly. "I know." Tears instantly welled in Jessica's eyes, not of sadness, but of rage. "Are you satisfied now? This is all your fault. If you hadn't made that scene at dinner." "Enough!" Michael suddenly snapped at her. It was the first time I had ever seen him speak to Jessica that way. Jessica, stunned, closed her mouth, but the tears flowed faster. Michael wiped his face, his voice low. "Mom, we need to talk." I slowly stood up and followed him into the study. The room was still littered with Thanksgiving decorations. A single red lantern hung crookedly on a bookshelf, a silent witness to the farce. Michael closed the door and suddenly dropped to his knees. "Mom, I was wrong. I didn't help him up. I just quietly looked at the son I had once loved with my entire being." His forehead touched the floor, his shoulders trembling slightly. "Was Jessica's baby really gone?" I asked. Michael looked up, his eyes bloodshot. The doctor said, "She was never pregnant in the first place." The words were like a knife to my heart. Even though I had suspected it, hearing it confirmed made it hard to breathe. They had actually used such a lie to deceive everyone, including me. "So, you made up the pregnancy just to have a better excuse to send me to a nursing home?" My voice was unnaturally calm. Michael hung his head in shame. "Mom, it was Jessica's idea," she said. "She said the relatives would be more supportive of our decision that way. And you?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Did you not have a single thought of your own? Michael, you are 37 years old, not 3. He was speechless, able to do nothing but avoid my gaze. "Get up," I sighed. "Kneeling won't solve anything." Michael struggled to his feet and slumped into a chair. "Your uncle and the other relatives. They're furious," I said bluntly. "Especially your uncle. He's talking about reconsidering his partnership with your company." Michael's face went white. His uncle's company was his biggest client, accounting for 40% of his annual revenue. "Mom," his voice trembled, Can you talk to him for me?" I almost laughed out loud. How ironic. 3 days ago, he wanted to ship me off to a home, and now he needed my help to save his business. "Why should I help you?" I stared into his eyes. "Give me one reason." Michael opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. Finally, He hung his head in defeat. I don't know. Just then, the doorbell rang. I saw through the window that it was Sarah from Social Services, a folder in her hand. I'll get it, I said, leaving Michael alone in the study to stew in his thoughts. Sarah's face lit up when she saw me. Mrs. Miller, are you all right? I heard what happened at Thanksgiving. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let her in. I saw Jessica peek her head out of the kitchen. When she saw Sarah, her face changed, and she quickly ducked back inside. In the living room, Sarah lowered her voice. Ma'am, the community leaders are taking your case very seriously. We've arranged for legal aid if you want to press charges against your son and daughter-in-law. Not for now, I shook my head. But I do need you to keep something for me. I retrieved an old cookie tin from my bedroom. Inside was all the evidence I had secretly collected over the years: medical records, recordings, copies of photos. Sarah took the box with a solemn expression. I'll keep this in the community center's safe. Only my supervisor and I have the key. Before she left, she hesitated. Ma'am, are you sure you don't want to consider staying at the shelter for a few days? The time isn't right yet. I patted her hand. Thank you, Sarah. After seeing Sarah out, I found Michael standing in the shadows of the hallway, his expression unreadable. Mom, his voice was dry. Are you really going to sue us? I didn't answer directly. That depends on the choices you and Jessica make. That night, I couldn't sleep. I decided to get up for a glass of water. As I passed the study, I heard sounds of rummaging. The door was slightly ajar. I saw Michael on his knees on the floor, frantically searching for something. Found it, he whispered excitedly, pulling a yellowed envelope from the bottom drawer. I squinted, recognizing it as one of the documents my husband had treasured most. He had specifically told me to keep it safe, but he never told me what it was. With trembling hands, Michael opened the envelope and pulled out a yellowed piece of paper. In the lamplight, I could see it was a birth certificate. When he read the contents, he looked as if he had been struck by lightning and collapsed onto the floor. Impossible, he muttered to himself. This can't be. I gently pushed the door open. Michael, what are you looking for? Michael's head snapped up, his face filled with a terror I had never seen before. He frantically tried to stuff the document back into the envelope, but it was too late. I had seen it. The name on the birth certificate was Michael Collins. The father's name was listed as James Collins, my husband's name. But the mother's name was a name I didn't know. Susan White. Mom. Michael's voice shook. Who is Susan White? I took a deep breath. The secret could be kept no longer. She was your birth mother. Time seemed to freeze. Michael was frozen like a statue, the envelope fluttering from his hand to the floor. You're not my real mom? Each word seemed to be squeezed from his throat. I walked over, picked up the envelope, and gently smoothed its creases. No, I am your mother, just not the one who gave birth to you. Under the dim light, I told him the story that had been buried for so long. It was the winter of 1978, I said, my voice calm as I sat on the old sofa in the study. Your father and I had been married for 5 years, but we couldn't have children. The doctors told me my fallopian tubes were blocked, and it would be very difficult to conceive naturally. Michael sat opposite me like a statue, his eyes fixed on the envelope in my hands. Your father was working at the steel mill back then. A temporary worker named Susan White started there. She was a widow with a 2-year-old son. I paused. That was you. Michael's fingers dug into his palms, but he didn't interrupt. At the end of that year, there was an accident at the mill. Susan and your father were both there. My voice choked a little. Your father was trying to save her when a steel beam fell on his spine. He was in the hospital for 3 months. But Susan, she didn't make it. The study was terribly quiet, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock. Before she died, Susan entrusted you to us, I said, gently stroking the envelope. You were so little then, only 2 years and 3 months old. You have no memory of your birth mother. Michael suddenly stood up and began pacing the small study. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you lie to me for over 30 years? We wanted to tell you when you were an adult, I sighed. But when you were 15, your father was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Before he passed, he made me promise to keep it a secret. He was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would leave me. Michael stopped abruptly in front of the window, his back to me, his shoulders heaving. All these years, my voice trembled. I never once thought of you as an adopted son. In my heart, you have always been my own. Michael turned around, his face a storm of emotions I'd never seen. What about my birth father? I shook my head. Susan never spoke of him. And your father never asked. When we filed the adoption papers, the laws weren't as strict. We just used your father's name. Michael suddenly laughed, a laugh completely devoid of warmth. So, I'm not even a part of this family's bloodline. Do Uncle and the others know? No, I said, meeting his gaze. But is blood that important? Your father saved your birth mother's life. We raised you. Was all the love we gave you a lie? Michael didn't answer. He snatched the envelope and stormed out of the study. I heard the front door slam shut, followed by the roar of a car engine. I sat alone in the study, tears falling silently. My husband's dying fear had come true. Now that he knew the secret of his birth, would Michael choose to leave me? The next morning, I got a call from the hospital. Michael had gotten into a car accident driving while intoxicated. He had a fractured right leg and needed surgery. When I arrived at the hospital, Jessica was already waiting outside the emergency room. Seeing me, she didn't lash out as usual. She just said, her eyes red, "He's been calling your name." The surgery was successful, but Michael needed to be hospitalized for observation. I offered to stay and watch over him. To my surprise, Jessica didn't object, just said coldly, "Do whatever you want," and left. In the hospital room, Michael's face was pale under the anesthesia, looking like a helpless child. I gently stroked his forehead, remembering when he had a high fever at age 5. I had sat by his bed all night then, too. "Mom." He suddenly opened his eyes, his voice hoarse. "You're here." I nodded and offered him a glass of water. "The doctor says you need to stay in bed for 2 weeks." Michael didn't take the water. He grabbed my hand instead. Last night, I looked it up. His eyes were bloodshot. Susan White. My birth mother. She really did die in that steel mill accident. "Yes," I confirmed softly. "And your father?" He was left with a permanent injury from trying to save her. Michael let go of my hand and covered his face. I always thought you were my real parents." I didn't know what to say. I could only silently hold his other hand. "Mom," he asked suddenly, "if I had known the truth sooner, would you have been nicer to me?" The question stabbed me like a knife. So, in his eyes, I hadn't been good enough to him. "Michael," I struggled to keep my voice from shaking. "In all these 30-plus years, was there ever a day I didn't treat you like the most precious thing in the world? When you had pneumonia at 7, I didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. The year you took your SATs, I got up at 4 every morning to make you breakfast. When your business failed and you were in debt, I sold my only gold bracelet to help you. In all these years." Michael froze. Tears streamed silently down his face. "Then why? Why did I become like this? Why did I treat you that way?" I didn't answer, because the answer was too obvious. Everything changed when Jessica entered his life. But I didn't want to blame his wife at a time like this. On the 3rd day of his hospital stay, an unexpected visitor arrived, a reporter named Rachel. She was from the local TV station's public interest program, and she barged into the room with a recorder in her hand. "Mr. Collins," she said, getting straight to the point, "we received a tip that you have been abusing your mother for a long time and that it was all exposed at your Thanksgiving dinner. Is this true?" Michael's face flushed crimson. Who told you that?" Rachel didn't answer, turning to me instead. "Ma'am, would you be willing to talk? We were told your son forced you to sleep in a doghouse." I stood protectively in front of Michael's bed. "Miss, my son needs to rest right now. If you want an interview, please make an appointment through the proper channels." Rachel pressed on, unwilling to give up. "But our source provided photos and recordings." "Then I suggest you go ask your source," I said firmly. "Now please leave, or I'm calling security." After Rachel left in a huff, Michael looked at me, confused. "Mom, why didn't you expose me? That was your perfect chance for revenge." I straightened his blanket. "Because I'm your mother. No matter what you've done, I will never kick you when you're down in front of strangers." Michael's eyes reddened. He gripped my hand. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Just then, Jessica pushed open the door. Seeing the scene, her face immediately hardened. "Well, isn't this touching?" She threw a stack of documents onto the bedside table. "Michael, the company is in trouble. The bank is calling in our loan. Your uncle has terminated his contract, and now all our suppliers are demanding payment." Michael's face paled. "How could this happen?" Jessica sneered. "Isn't it obvious? It's all thanks to your dear mother. She smeared our names in front of the relatives, and now the whole town knows what an ungrateful son you are. Who would want to do business with you now?" I quietly stepped aside, watching as Michael frantically made calls from his hospital bed, begging for help. Every call ended in rejection. His face grew darker and darker. "It's all your fault." He finally unleashed his anger on me. "If you hadn't caused that scene at dinner, none of this would be happening." I calmly accepted his accusations, but my heart felt like a block of ice. Even after knowing the truth of his birth, even after I had just protected him from a reporter, the moment a crisis hit, he reflexively blamed me. "Michael," I said slowly, "have you ever considered what the root of all this is? It's the way you and Jessica abused me, not my act of revealing the truth." Jessica shrieked, cutting me off. "You old hag. You made me lose my baby, you made Michael get in a car crash, and now you're trying to ruin his career. What do you want?" What did I want? The simple question stunned me. I wanted my son's love and respect. I wanted a peaceful family, but those things seemed impossible now. "I don't want anything," I finally said. "I just hope you two will seriously reflect on your actions." As I left the hospital, a light rain began to fall. I didn't have an umbrella and let the cold drops soak my coat. 37 years of a mother's love. Was it really no match for the absence of a blood tie and the influence of a wife? Back at the house, I called Sarah. "Sarah, about that shelter. Can I go there now?" The community shelter for the elderly was much more comfortable than I had imagined. My room faced south, about 150 square feet, with a private bathroom and a small balcony. After helping me with the paperwork, Sarah thoughtfully brought me a small potted plant. "Ma'am, this is a temporary shelter. You can stay for up to 3 months, she explained softly. "During that time, we'll arrange for a mediator to speak with your son." I nodded and hung the few clothes I had brought in the closet. There wasn't much to bring. In Michael's house, I had almost no personal belongings. "By the way," Sarah hesitated, "that reporter, Rachel, has been asking about you. Would you like to meet with her?" I thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, but on one condition. The report cannot use Michael's full name or show his face." Sarah looked confused. "Ma'am, you're still protecting him?" "I'm not protecting him," I said with a bitter smile. "I'm protecting myself. He is, after all, my son. To shame him is to shame myself for failing to raise him right." Rachel was younger than I expected, with a neat short haircut and bright, intelligent eyes. Her first words to me were, "Ma'am, you've suffered so much." The interview took place in a small meeting room at the shelter. Rachel was very professional, not trying to be sensational, just factually recording my story. When I showed her the old scars on my arms and the photos of me sleeping in the doghouse, her eyes reddened. "Ma'am, this is enough material for a special report," she said, her hand holding the recorder trembling slightly. "But I will respect your wishes and conceal the identities of those involved." "Thank you," I said with a tired smile. "My goal isn't exposure. I just hope Michael can truly understand his mistakes." Before she left, Rachel suddenly asked, "Ma'am, do you hate your son?" The question stunned me. Hate Michael, the child I raised with my own hands? The little boy who used to sit on my lap and listen to stories? "No," I finally answered. "I'm just very disappointed and very sad." On my 3rd day at the shelter, Carol came to visit, bringing the important file folder. "Helen, Michael has been looking for you everywhere," she said, worried. "He's been to my house 3 times asking where I hid the documents." My heart clenched. "Did you tell him?" "Of course not." Carol's eyes widened. "But I'm worried he might do something drastic." As we were talking, Sarah came running in. "Ma'am, your son is causing a scene at the entrance. He's demanding to see you." Through the window, I saw Michael leaning on crutches, his right leg still in a cast, arguing with a security guard. He looked haggard, his hair a mess, a far cry from his usual polished image. "Let him in," I told Sarah. "There are some things we need to clear up." The meeting was arranged in a mediation room with a community staff member present. The moment Michael saw me, his eyes reddened. "Mom, how could you come to a place like this, letting strangers laugh at our family?" "Michael," I said calmly, "you're the one who made me a laughingstock first." He was speechless, staring down at his crutches. "What do you want?" I asked directly. Michael looked up, his eyes flashing with a complex mix of emotions. "Mom, I need the deed to the old house. The company is about to go bankrupt. The bank said if I have property for collateral, they can give me a few more months." So that was it. He had come all this way, not to apologize, but for the property. "That house is what your father left me for my retirement," my voice trembled. "If I sell it, where will I live?" "You can live with us," Michael said eagerly. "I promise I'll treat you right this time." Such a familiar promise. He had said the same thing before Thanksgiving. "No, Michael," I shook my head. "I won't sign. That's the only thing your father and I own together." Michael's expression turned ugly. "So you'd rather watch me go bankrupt? Watch me end up on the street? You are 37 years old. You need to take responsibility for your own actions," I said calmly. "Besides, didn't you always say your company was doing very well?" That hit a nerve. Michael shot up, his crutch clattering to the floor. "It's all your fault. If you hadn't made that scene in front of the relatives, my uncle never would have pulled his investment. The suppliers never would have demanded payment." The mediator quickly stepped in. "Mr. Collins, please control your emotions." Michael ignored him, pointing his finger at my face. "You old hag. You're not even my real mother. What right do you have to hold on to my father's property?" The words stabbed me like a knife. Even though I knew he might think this way, hearing it out loud still made it hard to breathe. The mediator looked at us in shock. "Ma'am, is what he's saying true?" I fought back tears and nodded. "Yes, he's my adopted son. But I have never treated him any differently because of it." Michael sneered. "Really? Then why won't you give me the house? You were just waiting for a day like this, weren't you?" Looking at his distorted face, I suddenly felt a profound weariness. Was this man, whose eyes saw nothing but money and self-interest, really the child I had raised with such hardship? "Michael," I took a deep breath, "you should go. Until you truly understand your mistakes. We have nothing more to talk about." "You just wait," Michael spat, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The mediator looked at me with concern. "Ma'am, are you okay? Should I call a doctor?" I shook my head, the tears finally breaking free. "I'm fine. My heart just hurts." That evening, Rachel's report aired on television. Although the names were changed, anyone familiar with the story could tell who it was about. After the program, the director of the community center came to see me personally, offering legal assistance. "Ma'am, under the Elder Protection Act, you can sue your son and daughter-in-law for abuse and reclaim the assets you gifted them," the director said, pushing up his glasses. "That includes the down payment for their house." I shook my head with a bitter smile. "What good would that do? I'd win the case but lose my family. But you can't just keep letting them get away with it." Sarah couldn't help but interject. "You saw his attitude today." Just then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. When I answered, it was Jessica's voice. "Mom, I'm divorcing Michael." I was stunned. "What? I've had enough," Jessica cried on the other end of the line. "His company is bankrupt, and he's drowning in debt. Reporters are camped outside our door every day. My parents are so ashamed back home. And it's all because of you." I silently hung up the phone, a mix of emotions churning inside me. There were no winners in this family war. Everyone was wounded. Late at night, I took out an old photo of my husband and asked softly, "Honey, what should I do? Keep fighting or choose to forgive?" In the photo, my husband was smiling, as if to say, "Follow your heart." 3 days after Jessica filed for divorce, Michael came to the shelter again. This time, He didn't shout or argue. He just sat quietly in the visitor's room, waiting for me. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. His eyes were sunken, his face unshaven, his suit wrinkled. He smelled of alcohol. "Mom," his voice was hoarse. Jessica left. I sat down silently and poured him a glass of water. I heard. Michael didn't touch the glass. He buried his face in his hands. "The company is gone. The bank foreclosed on the house. I sold the car. I have nothing left." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. I didn't speak, waiting for him to continue. "Mom?" He suddenly fell to his knees. This time it wasn't for show. He prostrated himself on the floor. "I'm sorry. I truly know I was wrong." I didn't help him up immediately. Instead, I asked softly, "Wrong about what?" Michael looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Wrong for treating you that way, for forcing you to kneel, for making you sleep in the doghouse, for hurting you over money. And," I pressed, "and for blaming the company's failure on you, for only seeing you as an ATM." His voice grew smaller. "And, most of all, for using my adoption to deny the 37 years you spent raising me." These words were like knives, each one cutting open the deepest wounds between us. But only by letting out the poison could the wounds truly begin to heal. "Get up," I finally reached out to him. "The floor is cold." Michael didn't get up. Instead, he pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Mom, this is a letter of promise I wrote, if you're willing to give me another chance." I took the paper. It was covered in tiny, cramped writing, with his signature and thumbprint at the bottom. It detailed how many times a month he would visit me, how he would care for my daily needs, how finances would be arranged. It was incredibly detailed. "Who helped you write this?" I asked, surprised. This didn't seem like something Michael would think of. "Rachel, the reporter," Michael said, looking down in shame. "She found me, said she wanted to do an interview on the abuser's perspective. We talked for a long time, so that was it." Rachel had facilitated this moment of reflection in her own way. "Mom," Michael looked up, his eyes filled with a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I just hope you'll give me a chance to make it up to you." I let out a long sigh. "Michael, do you know why I put up with it for so long?" He shook his head. "Because I believed that the kind little boy I raised was still in there somewhere, just blinded by money and greed. I gently stroked his hair, just as I did when he was little. And now, I'm so happy to see he's finally come back." Michael's tears broke free again. He buried his face in my lap and sobbed, like a lost child who had finally found his way home. From that day on, Michael began his difficult path to redemption. He came to the shelter every day on his crutches to eat with me, help with my laundry, and even tried to learn how to cook, though he nearly burned down the kitchen the first time. The staff at the center were amazed at his transformation. Sarah secretly told me, "Mrs. Miller, Michael tells everyone he meets that you're the greatest mother in the world." It gives us all goosebumps. 2 weeks later, I decided to leave the shelter. Not to move back in with Michael, he was now renting a small, humble apartment himself, but to return to the old house I had shared with my husband. The 2-bedroom house was old, but it was filled with memories. Michael spent a week helping me clean and make repairs, even using his own money to buy new furniture. "Mom," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "once I'm back on my feet financially, I'll install an elevator for you to make it easier to get up and down the stairs." I smiled and shook my head. "That's not necessary. These old bones need the exercise." The first weekend after I moved back, Michael brought some unexpected news. "Mom, Jessica wants to see you." My hands paused what they were doing. "Why?" Michael gave a bitter smile. "She says she wants to apologize in person. Her parents saw the report on TV and were so angry they threatened to disown her." I thought for a moment and nodded. "Let her come." Jessica was thinner than the last time I saw her, her eyes red and swollen. The old arrogance was gone. When she saw me, she knelt without a word. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I didn't help her up. I just asked calmly, "What are you sorry for?" "For everything I did to you," Jessica sobbed. "I was so selfish. I only cared about money, and I drove a wedge between you and Michael." "Get up," I said. handing her a tissue. "The floor is dirty." Jessica didn't get up. Instead, she took a jewelry box from her bag. "Mom, this is your gold bracelet. I secretly took it and sold it. I bought it back." I took the box. Inside was the very bracelet my husband had given me. Our wedding date was still engraved on the inside. Tracing the familiar pattern, my eyes grew moist. "Jessica," I said softly, "do you know, my husband bought this bracelet with his first month's salary. We were so poor back then we couldn't afford meat, but he insisted on buying it." Jessica lowered her head in shame. "I'm so sorry. I truly didn't know." "I accept your apology," I said, closing the box. "But trust takes time to rebuild." Jessica nodded vigorously. "I understand. I'll prove it with my actions." That night, I had a strange dream. I dreamt my husband was standing on the balcony of our old house, smiling at me. I asked him, "Honey, did I do the right thing?" He didn't answer. He just pointed to his heart, and then faded away. I woke up to a tear-soaked pillow. The first rays of dawn were shining on the recovered gold bracelet, making it gleam. Autumn passed and winter arrived. The heating in the old house wasn't very good. Michael came every weekend to check on it and bought me the best space heater he could find. "Mom, why don't you just move in with me?" he would always say. "My apartment is small, but the heating is great." I always smiled and refused. "No, I'm used to it here." In truth, I loved the peace of the old house. Doing Tai Chi on the balcony in the morning, knitting in my rocking chair in the afternoon, watching some television at night, this simple life was a luxury to me. On New Year's Day, Michael and Jessica came to see me together. They hadn't remarried yet, but their relationship had softened. Jessica was now working as a kindergarten teacher, and she seemed much gentler. "Mom, try the dumplings I made," Jessica said, proudly opening a container. "Pork and cabbage, your favorite." I tried one. It was actually quite good. Seeing Jessica's expectant look, I nodded. "Very good. Much better than Michael's cooking." Michael pretended to protest. "Hey, my cooking skills have improved a lot lately." We all laughed. The atmosphere was warm and comfortable for the first time in a long time. After the meal, Michael said mysteriously, "Mom, I have some good news." It turned out that through Rachel, the reporter, Michael had met an entrepreneur who admired his skills and had invested in a new startup for him. This time, it was in educational consulting. The scale was small, but the prospects were good. "And," Michael said excitedly, "Uncle is willing to give me another chance." He said, "As long as I've truly changed." I nodded, pleased. "Then work hard. Don't disappoint your uncle again." "I won't," Michael promised solemnly. "Mom, this time I'll build it from the ground up. The right way." Just then, the doorbell rang. It was the community director and Sarah, holding a red envelope. "Mrs. Miller," the director said with a wide smile, "congratulations, you've been named one of the city's top 10 most inspiring people. The award ceremony is next week." I was stunned. "Me? How is that possible?" Sarah explained excitedly. Rachel's report had a huge public response. "In a viewer poll, you were #1 by a landslide." Michael and Jessica were also shocked. Then they hugged me proudly. "Mom, that's amazing." I shook my head, a little embarrassed. I just did what any mother would do. The award ceremony was held at the city's cultural center. As I stood on the stage, looking down at Michael and Jessica clapping in the audience, I suddenly remembered that winter 37 years ago, the first time I held a crying infant Michael in my arms, my heart filled with love and hope. Time flies. That baby grew up, took a wrong turn, but finally found his way back. And I, his mother, had never given up on him. After the ceremony, Michael drove me home. On the way, he hesitated for a long time before finally speaking. "Mom, I want to change my name." "Change your name?" I looked at him, puzzled. "Yes," he nodded. "I want to change my first name to Ian. To honor you and Dad for raising me." My eyes instantly welled with tears. "Oh, Michael, Ian, a name is just a label. It's what's in your heart that matters." "I know," he said, taking my hand. "But this is a symbol of my new beginning." And, he paused, I've already contacted the records office. I'm going to have my birth mother, Susan White's name, added to my official documents as well. She gave me life, but you gave me a life. Outside the car window, snowflakes began to drift down. I looked at my son's determined profile and suddenly understood a profound truth. Blood may determine your origins, but only love can define your family. Back home, I took out my husband's photograph and gently wiped the glass. Honey, our son has grown up. In the photo, my husband was smiling, as if to say, I always knew he would. When spring came, the magnolia tree in front of the old house bloomed. Michael, I should call him Ian now, and Jessica officially remarried and moved into a condo not far from me. Every weekend, they would come over for dinner. Sometimes, Jessica would bring some of the children from her kindergarten, and the small yard would be filled with laughter. One afternoon, I was sunning myself on the balcony when Ian rushed over, holding a document. Mom, good news. The old house has been zoned for redevelopment. We can get a new apartment, and there's compensation money. I took the document and read it carefully. It was true. According to the city plan, our neighborhood was going to be turned into a park, and residents would get priority to buy apartments in a new building nearby. Mom, Ian said excitedly, I found a great place for you in a building with an elevator. 2 bedrooms, great light. I smiled and shook my head. Ian, Mom's old. I don't need such a nice place. I want to donate some of the compensation money to the community shelter, and the rest can be for your business. Ian firmly refused. No way. This was your and Dad's house. The money has to be used for you. Seeing him get all red in the face, I couldn't help but laugh. All right, whatever you say. Then I winked mysteriously. But I have one condition. What condition? Don't you and Jessica think it's about time you gave me a grandchild? I asked with a grin. A real one this time, not a fake pregnancy. Ian's face turned even redder. Mom, we're planning on it. Good, I nodded, satisfied. The old house was small, but the new apartment will be spacious, just enough for 3 generations. Ian froze for a second, then understood. Mom, are you saying you'd be willing to live with us? I nodded. What, am I not welcome? Of course you're welcome. He excitedly picked me up and spun me around, nearly throwing out his back. Ouch. Mom, you need to go on a diet. You little brat. I pretended to swat at him, but I couldn't stop laughing. In the sunlight, the magnolia petals drifted down on the wind, like confetti for the new chapter of our lives. After all the storms, this family had finally found its true spring. The early summer sun streamed through the curtains into the room. I sat in my wicker chair in the old house, watching Ian and Jessica bustle around, packing things up. The redevelopment project had begun, and we were officially handing over the keys next week. Mom, should we take this tea set? Jessica asked, carefully holding a blue and white porcelain set. It was the only valuable thing my husband and I owned when we got married. I nodded. Take it. Your dad loved to use that set for guests. Ian poked his head out of the study. Mom, what about all these old books? Some of them are getting moldy. Clean them off and take them all, I insisted. Your dad collected them one by one. They were his treasures. Movers came in and out, and the old house gradually emptied. I touched every mark on the walls. The notch on the doorframe was where we measured Ian's height when he was 10. The grease stain on the kitchen wall was from my husband's first attempt at cooking. On the balcony railing, there was still the crooked carving Ian made as a child. Ian was here. Mom, just sit and rest. We'll handle the heavy lifting, Jessica said, thoughtfully pouring me a glass of warm water. Since our reconciliation, Jessica was like a different person. She no longer wore heavy makeup. She spoke softly, and she had even learned to cook a few simple dishes. What surprised me most was that she had offered to take care of me along with Ian. Mrs. Miller, Sarah from the community center, suddenly appeared at the door, holding a large envelope. Here are the keys to your new apartment and the deed. Considering your situation, the city gave you priority selection. I took the envelope, a little confused. I thought we weren't getting the keys until next week. Sarah smiled mysteriously. It's a special perk for one of the city's top 10 most inspiring people. And, she lowered her voice, Rachel, the reporter, Wants to do a follow-up story on you moving into your new home. The station director is very keen on this positive story. I shook my head wearily. What's there to report? Of course there is, Sarah said excitedly. An elderly woman who was once abused by her son, who then transforms him through love and forgiveness, and now the whole family moves into a new home together. What a wonderful theme. Just as she spoke, Rachel arrived with a cameraman. She was wearing a crisp, light blue shirt and looked sharp and energetic. "Ma'am," she said, warmly shaking my hand. "Congratulations on the new home. We'd like to document this wonderful moment." I looked at Ian and Jessica, who were packing. They nodded at me, indicating they didn't mind. And so, our moving day turned into a mini documentary shoot. The new apartment was on the 15th floor of the Spring Meadows complex, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with great light. As soon as I walked in, I was drawn to the bright, floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight poured into the entire living room. "Mom, do you like it?" Ian looked at me expectantly. "I picked this unit specifically. There's nothing blocking the view. It's incredible." I walked to the window. The entire city stretched out before me. In the distance was a lush green park, and closer by was a sparkling man-made lake. It was truly beautiful. I love it. It's just... I hesitated. "It's so high up. I'm a little dizzy." Jessica immediately took my arm. "Mom, you'll get used to it. And the elevator is very smooth. You won't feel a thing." Rachel and her cameraman filmed the scene. Then she asked, "Ma'am, from being abused by your son to moving into a new home as a happy family, what is the biggest lesson you've learned?" I thought for a moment. A home isn't a place for logic. It's a place for love. And sometimes, forgiveness takes more courage than punishment. The words seemed to strike a chord with Ian. He turned away and wiped his eyes. After the hustle and bustle of moving, Rachel and her cameraman left, leaving the three of us to unpack. Jessica was in the kitchen organizing dishes. Ian was assembling a new wardrobe, and I was resting on the balcony. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. The visitor was a woman in her 60s, dressed modestly but with an elegant air. "Excuse me, is this Ian Collins's home?" Her voice trembled slightly. Ian came to the door. "I'm Ian. And you are." The woman's gaze went past Ian and landed squarely on me. "You must be Mrs. Helen Collins." I nodded and stood up, confused. "And you are?" "My name is Martha." She took a deep breath. "I'm Susan White's cousin." The name hit the room like a bomb. Susan White. Ian's birth mother. In over 30 years, no one from her life had ever appeared. Ian's face changed instantly. You knew my birth mother?" Martha nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "Before Susan passed, she asked me to look after her child. But I was overseas at the time. By the time I came back, I couldn't find you." I quickly invited her inside. Martha's hands were shaking. Jessica thoughtfully poured her a cup of hot tea. "I've been looking for you all these years," Martha said, taking an old photo album from her bag. "It wasn't until I saw Mrs. Collins's story on TV that I recognized Ian. He looked so much like Susan." The album contained photos of a young Susan White, an oval face, big eyes, and a small mole by the corner of her mouth. Ian's trembling hand reached out to touch a photo, a tear dropping onto the plastic film. "What was she like?" Ian's voice was choked. Martha's face softened with nostalgia. "Susan was cheerful, loved to sing. She was very skilled with her hands, could knit all sorts of beautiful sweaters." She suddenly looked at me. "Mrs. Collins, you've raised Ian so well. Susan would be so grateful, wherever she is." I shook my head. "I just did what any mother would do." Martha hesitated, then took out another envelope. "This is what Susan left for her child. It has her diary and some information about Ian's birth father." Ian pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. I don't want to know." "Ian," I said softly, "you need to know your past to better face your future." Before Martha left, she gave us her contact information and said she hoped to stay in touch. After the door closed, the room was silent, filled only by the sound of Ian's heavy breathing. "Mom," he finally said, "do you think I should read it?" I patted his hand. "That is your right, and your choice." Whatever you decide, I will support you. That night, I got up and saw the light was still on in the study. I pushed the door open to see Ian at the desk. Susan's diary open before him, his face streaked with tears. "Mom," he looked up. "My birth father. He's still alive." At the breakfast table, Ian's dark circles were stark. He mechanically stirred the oatmeal in his bowl, not saying a word. Jessica looked at him with concern. "Didn't you sleep well last night?" Ian shook his head and suddenly put down his spoon. "Mom, Jessica, I have something to tell you." He took a photograph from his pocket and placed it on the table. It was a picture of a young soldier with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes who bore a striking resemblance to Ian. "This is my birth father, Robert Miller." Ian's voice was dry. "He's a colonel in the army, stationed out west." I took the photo and studied it. It was true. Ian's brow and jaw were just like this soldier's. "The diary said they were high school sweethearts," Ian continued. "He never knew I existed. He was transferred to a base overseas, and they lost contact." Jessica took Ian's hand. "Do you want to meet him?" The question hung in the air. Ian looked to me for help. I gave a small nod, encouraging him to follow his heart. "I don't know," Ian said, holding his head in his hands. "On one hand, I'm curious. On the other, I feel like I'd be betraying Dad. And you, Mom." I put down my bowl and went to his side. "Ian, blood is a natural tie, but family is a choice you make every day. If your father were here, he would support any decision you made." Tears dropped onto the table. "Mom, you really don't mind?" "To be honest, I mind a little," I admitted. "But not because of him, because of me. I'm afraid of losing you." "Never." Ian shot up and hugged me tightly. "You will always be my mom. Nothing will ever change that." Jessica's eyes reddened too. "Mom, we're a family. Nothing can break us apart." At that moment, the fear in my heart finally subsided. 37 years of love couldn't be erased by a single photograph. 3 days later, Martha visited again, bringing more news about Robert Miller. "He's in Denver now," she said. "Divorced for years, with a daughter studying abroad." She hesitated. "I've already contacted him." Ian's hand twitched, spilling tea on his pants. "What did he say?" Jessica asked for her husband. Martha smiled. At first, he didn't believe it. But after he saw Ian's photo, he got on a plane that night. "What?" Ian jumped to his feet. "He's here? Where?" "He's downstairs," Martha said, looking at me. "But he said he wouldn't come up until he had Mrs. Collins's permission." That detail warmed my heart. It seemed Robert Miller was a man who understood boundaries, who respected the family that had raised Ian for 37 years. "Please, ask him to come up," I said. "It's almost lunchtime. He can join us." When the doorbell rang, Ian was so nervous he could barely walk straight. Jessica held his hand, giving him strength. When the door opened, a man with graying temples but a straight back stood there. He was in civilian clothes, but he still carried the air of a soldier. "Ma'am," he gave me a standard military salute. "I apologize for the intrusion." Robert's voice was deep and strong, but his eyes were full of apprehension. I stepped aside to let him in, and his gaze immediately locked onto Ian. The two strangers, connected by blood, just stared at each other. Time seemed to stop. Finally, it was Robert whose eyes reddened first. "You look just like Susan." That one simple sentence shattered all of Ian's defenses, and he began to cry like a child. Lunch was a strange affair, awkward and warm, sad and joyful all at once. Robert told stories of his youth with Susan and how he was transferred overseas. "I wrote so many letters, but they were all returned," he said, his voice thick with pain. "By the time I came back to find her, I was told she had passed away. And the child, too." Ian finally spoke. "Do you hate me?" The question stunned Robert. "Hate you? Why?" "Because I took Susan's life." Ian's voice trembled. "If she hadn't been pregnant." "Don't be foolish," Robert interrupted passionately. "Having you was the proudest moment of Susan's life. She wrote in her diary that you were the greatest gift heaven had ever given her. Watching this father and son reunite, I quietly slipped out onto the balcony to give them some space. Jessica followed, gently placing a shawl over my shoulders. "Mom, "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I nodded and forced a smile. "Just feeling a little emotional. Ian has finally found his roots." Jessica squeezed my hand. "Mom, don't worry. Ian told me last night that no matter what happens, you will always be the most important person in his life." Just then, Ian and Robert came out together. Robert suddenly gave me a deep bow. "Ma'am, thank you for raising Ian to be such a fine man. I have a request to make." "Go on." "I would like to acknowledge Ian as my son, but I will never do anything to interfere with his relationship with you," Robert said with sincerity. "If you agree, I hope I can visit you both often in the future." This tough soldier now looked like a nervous schoolboy awaiting my verdict. I looked at Ian's hopeful eyes and nodded. "That is your right." Then I put on a stern face. "But you'll have to get past me first. I hear you soldiers can hold your liquor. Stay for dinner tonight, and we'll see what you're made of." Robert blinked, then broke into a hearty laugh. "All right, ma'am. I like your style. I'd be honored." That night, we drank and talked for hours. Robert told stories of his time on the frontier. Ian talked about the struggles of his business. Jessica shared funny anecdotes from her kindergarten class, and I reminisced about my husband. As the night wore on, Robert raised his glass. "The first toast is to Susan for leaving us such a wonderful son. The second is to Mr. Collins for raising him into a man. And the third is to you, ma'am. Your grace and forgiveness put a rough man like me to shame." After 3 toasts, the tough soldier was weeping openly. Ian, flushed from the wine, had one arm around Robert and the other around me. "I have 2 dads," he mumbled, "and 1 mom. No, and Jessica, I'm so happy." Late that night, Robert took his leave. Before he left, he solemnly handed me an envelope. "Ma'am, this is a small token. Ian mentioned you wanted to donate to the shelter. Please count me in." I couldn't refuse. After closing the door, I found Ian passed out on the sofa, smiling foolishly. "Mom," he slurred, "I'm so happy today." I took off his shoes and covered him with a blanket. "Silly boy. Go to sleep." Jessica came out of the kitchen with a glass of water. "Mom, you go rest. I'll take care of him." Watching Jessica carefully help Ian, I suddenly felt that this family, after so many storms, had finally found its rainbow. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. It was Rachel, holding a copy of that day's newspaper. The front page was a picture of me, Robert, and Ian, with the headline, "A Family Reunited Across 37 Years." "Ma'am," Rachel said excitedly, "this story has gone viral. Everyone is calling it the most moving story of the year." I shook my head wearily. "You reporters never miss a trick." Rachel winked. "And there's more. The national news program, Face to Face, wants to invite your whole family for a special interview." "Oh no, absolutely not," I waved my hands. "We're just ordinary people. We just want to live our lives." Just then, Ian came out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, who is it?" Seeing Rachel, he woke up instantly. "Rachel, what's going on?" Rachel repeated the invitation from the network. To my surprise, Ian didn't refuse immediately. He looked at me. "Mom, I actually think we should consider it." "Why?" I asked, confused. Ian sat me down. "Mom, our story might be able to help other families. Like you said, home is a place for love. That's a message worth spreading." Jessica came out and, hearing the conversation, nodded in agreement. "Mom, Ian is right. Don't you always say we should help people if we can?" Looking at their expectant faces, I finally relented. "All right. But on one condition, it can't disrupt our normal lives." Rachel jumped for joy. "That's wonderful. I'll contact the producers right away." After Rachel left, Ian suddenly said, "Mom, I have an idea." "What is it?" "I want to change my last name. Back to Miller," he said carefully. "But I want to keep my first name as Ian, Ian Miller, to honor the memory of you and Dad raising me, while also acknowledging my birth father's heritage." The decision struck me, but seeing the sincerity in my son's eyes, I nodded. "It's your name, and your choice. I respect it." Ian now. Ian Miller hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom. And don't worry. No matter what my name is, I will always be your son." Jessica chimed in. Does that mean I should change my name to Mrs. Ian Miller? The joke made us all laugh. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, shining on this newly redefined family, warm and bright. After the television interview aired, our family became somewhat famous. When I went out for groceries, strangers would often recognize me and greet me warmly. Aren't you that wonderful mother from TV? The community center even opened a family mediation room in my name, asking me to help neighbors with their domestic disputes. It was busy, but seeing families reconcile brought me a deep sense of fulfillment. Robert Miller visited from Denver every 2 weeks, always bringing some local specialties. He and Ian grew closer, often talking late into the night. But what touched me most was that Ian always insisted that Sundays were our mother-son day, no exceptions. On the first day of fall, Jessica announced some wonderful news at the dinner table. Mom, Ian, I'm pregnant. Really? I stood up in surprise. How far along? 2 months, Jessica said shyly. The doctor said the due date is next spring. Ian was so excited, he practically danced around the room, immediately calling Robert to share the good news. Watching their joy, I suddenly thought of my husband. If he were still here, how happy he would be. To welcome the new life, we began to redecorate the apartment. Ian insisted on giving me the master bedroom, saying that the elderly needed better rest. I couldn't refuse their kindness. Mom, what do you think of this crib? Jessica was browsing online. I was thinking of putting it in our room, to make it easier to take care of the baby. I smiled and shook my head. Put it in my room. You young people sleep too soundly. You won't even hear the baby cry. I'm a light sleeper. I can help watch him. Jessica was so moved her eyes welled up. Mom, you're the best. When Robert heard the news, he took a week off to come and help. He was incredibly handy, painting the nursery a soft blue in half a day. Ma'am, he said, chatting with me as he painted, I've applied for early retirement. After the baby is born, I plan to move here permanently. I was a bit surprised. What about your life in Denver? It's already been approved, he smiled. All these years, I owe Ian so much. I want to make up for it. And, he scratched his head, embarrassed, I want to enjoy being a grandpa. Seeing this once tough soldier, now so full of grandfatherly anticipation, made me chuckle. As Jessica's belly grew, so did the joy in our home. No matter how busy Ian was at work, he was always home in time to take a walk with his wife. Robert started studying infant care, his bookshelf now filled with parenting books, and I began knitting tiny sweaters and socks, preparing for my grandchild's arrival. However, our peaceful life was shattered when Jessica was 7 months pregnant. One night, I was awakened by a frantic knocking on my door. Mom, open up. Ian's voice was laced with tears. It's Jessica. She's bleeding. I leaped out of bed. When I opened the door, I saw Jessica, her face deathly pale, cradled in Ian's arms. A large red stain was spreading across her pajama pants. Quick, to the hospital. I grabbed my coat and purse and rushed out with them. The streets were empty. We waited for 5 minutes without seeing a single taxi. Ian was frantic. It was Robert who came to the rescue. He had been in town for business and was staying at a nearby hotel. Get in. Robert screeched to a halt in his rental car. On the way to the hospital, Jessica was sweating profusely, the bleeding getting worse. I held her hand tightly, constantly reassuring her. Hang in there. We're almost there. The lights of the emergency room were harsh and cold. After an examination, the doctor's face was grim. Placental abruption. We need to perform an emergency C-section immediately. Doctor, the baby is only 7 months. Ian's voice trembled. If we don't operate now, both mother and child are in danger, the doctor said, already having a nurse prepare the consent forms. The pen shook in Ian's hand. He could barely sign his name. I put a hand on his shoulder, feeling his whole body tremble. They'll be okay, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Modern medicine is amazing. The light above the operating room door turned on. The 4 of us waited anxiously in the hallway. Ian crouched in a corner, holding his head, crying silently. Robert kept checking his watch, his lips a thin, hard line. I counted the beads of my rosary, praying. 3 hours felt like 3 years. When the operating room doors finally opened, we all rushed forward. The surgery was a success, the doctor said, tired but relieved. It's a boy. A little small, only 4 pounds, 9 ounces, but his vital signs are stable. The mother is out of danger as well. Ian, overjoyed, grabbed the doctor's hand, thanking him profusely. A nurse came out with a tiny bundle. Want to see the baby? We carefully leaned in. The infant was heartbreakingly small, his skin so thin it was almost translucent, but his tiny hands and feet waved, showing a fierce will to live. Will he make it? Ian asked, his voice choked. Preemie care is very advanced now, the nurse reassured him. After some time in an incubator, he'll grow up healthy and strong. When Jessica was wheeled out, she was weak, but she managed a relieved smile when she saw a picture of her husband and child. I wiped the sweat from her forehead and whispered, "You did so well. Get some rest." After Jessica was settled, Robert offered to stay the night. "Ma'am, you need your rest. Ian and I can take turns." I shook my head. "I can't sleep. You two go home. You have to work tomorrow. I'll stay." Ultimately, we compromised. Ian went home to get some essentials. Robert stayed at the hospital with me, and I dozed in a chair in the room. In the morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, my phone rang. It was Sarah from the community center. "Mrs. Miller, I heard about Jessica. Do you need any help?" I realized that in our rush, we had called Robert but forgotten to tell anyone else. Soon the news spread. Rachel came with a TV crew to visit. The community director brought a donation. Even my nephew, on behalf of my brother-in-law, sent a basket of nutritional supplements. What moved me most was when the same relatives who had condemned Ian at Thanksgiving started to arrive. They not only showed concern for Jessica and the baby, but they also sincerely apologized to Ian. "Let the past be the past," Ian said magnanimously. "We're family." Watching this, I smiled with relief. This family, after so many storms, had finally welcomed the dawn of a new life, and with it, true reconciliation. A week later, Jessica was discharged, but the baby had to stay in the NICU a while longer. Every afternoon, we would go to the hospital and look through the glass at that resilient little life. "Mom," Ian said one day, "I want to name the baby Leo." I looked at him, surprised. "But you've changed your last name to Miller." "Yes, I've acknowledged my birth father, but the debt I owe to the man who raised me is greater than anything," Ian said firmly. "The baby will take your family name, Collins, to honor my dad. His middle name can be Ian, Leo Ian Collins. It represents the love of 3 generations." Robert, who was standing nearby, didn't object. In fact, he nodded in approval. A good name, meaningful. Jessica also smiled, "And we can call him Leo, like the Sunday." "It's perfect." And so, with the hopes of the entire family, little Leo grew stronger every day. On the day he was discharged, the nurse placed the now 6.5-pound baby into Jessica's arms. We were all moved to tears. In the car on the way home, Ian drove with extreme care, afraid of the slightest bump. Robert was like a professional nanny, ready with a bottle or diaper at a moment's notice. And I just stared at Leo's little face, not wanting to miss a single expression. "Mom," Jessica said suddenly, "here, you hold Leo." With trembling hands, I took the fragile yet strong little life into my arms. When his tiny fingers wrapped around my index finger, a current of warmth flowed through me. This was the continuation of a bloodline, the legacy of love, the future hope of this family. "Welcome home, Leo," I whispered. "Grandma, Grandpa, Mom, and Dad, we all love you." The sunlight shone through the car window onto Leo's little face. He blinked open his eyes, as if to say, "I love you, too."